Wheelchairs should stay at home. They make the place look pitiful. The man's voice wasn't loud, but it cut like a blade through the quiet rhythm of the diner. No one spoke, not even the waitress refilling sugar jars. But then, without warning, a boot kicked the back of the chair, and the woman in it went flying. Plates shattered, coffee spilled, her head hit tile, and no one moved, except one boy, and one father, and a phone call that would bring the storm. Because exactly 30 minutes later, the gravel outside groaned under the weight of a military Humvee. Doors opened. 3 Marines stepped inside. And for the first time that day, the whole room stood still, not out of fear, but shame. Thank you for being here. Sometimes, the smallest moments carry the greatest meaning. Today's story is one of those, quiet, powerful, and worth remembering. If it touches your heart, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like more stories like this, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one. Now let's take a closer look at what really happened. The dust always lingered a little longer in Hadley, Montana. Especially near sunset, it clung to the windows of Lena's place, an old roadside diner where the coffee was always fresh and the veterans knew they'd be remembered. The building sat just off Route 12, 5 miles past the old grain silos and across from a one-pump gas station that hadn't worked right since the Clinton administration. Inside, things were quiet, like always. And that's just how Clara Dane liked it. She sat in the far left corner, where the light came in warm and golden through the blinds. At 48, Clara didn't look like a war hero. Not anymore. The hair was shorter now, more gray than she'd admit. And beneath her faded denim jeans, where her left leg used to be, rested a carbon fiber prosthetic she had learned to live with, even if it never stopped aching. It wasn't the pain that lingered. It was the silence, the phantom weight, the memories. Clara had been a Marine Staff Sergeant, 3rd deployment in Helmand Province when the IED went off. She'd pulled 3 civilians out of a burning vehicle before the second blast took her leg. The others didn't survive, not even her commanding officer. She never talked about it, not at Lena's, not anywhere. Instead, she folded napkins, brewed coffee, took orders. The diner owner, Mike Lennox, had been the one to give her a shot after she returned. He'd seen the Marine Corps tattoo on her forearm and didn't ask any questions. Just handed her a schedule and said, "You start Monday." That was 3 years ago. Clara had been showing up on time every shift since. She didn't wear the pin. Not anymore. But she kept it tucked in her pocket, right next to a photo worn soft from years of handling her and her unit, arms around each other in front of a Humvee, under a blazing Afghan sunrise. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was alive. That day never left her. And so Lena's place became her outpost. Not just a job, but an anchor. Between the breakfast rush and the late lunch lull, Clara would claim her moment of peace. The regulars knew not to disturb her. Even the teenagers who came in for milkshakes seemed to understand. The woman in the wheelchair at table 7 was someone different. Someone who'd seen things. She wasn't loud. Didn't like attention. But she had a quiet command about her, the kind that came from knowing what matters when bullets fly and the air turns red. She was careful. Precise. Coffee poured to the millimeter. Orders memorized. Silence respected. It was Clara's way of staying grounded. But not everyone valued that kind of strength. The day it all changed started like any other. Sunlight slipped through the blinds in long, golden beams. Steam curled from mugs of dark roast. Sinatra played softly on the radio. Fly Me to the Moon as always around 3:17 p.m. Clara had just finished wiping down the counter when the bell over the door let out a sharp jangle. 4 men entered. Loud. Unshaven. The kind of swagger that came from too many shots and not enough dignity. Clara didn't flinch. She knew the ringleader. Everyone in Hadley did. Rick Madsen, once a private in the Army. Dishonorably discharged after an incident in Germany involving a stolen Humvee, a nightclub, and 3 broken jaws. Now, he worked part-time at a scrapyard and full-time at making people uncomfortable. His buddies trailed behind, laughing at nothing, voices a few decibels too high for a room that held veterans and grieving wives. "Well, look who it is," Rick announced, eyes landing on Clara, the one-legged waitress. Clara said nothing. She kept folding napkins, Rick sauntered past, letting his fingers drum across her wheelchair handles with mock tenderness. Ain't there a health code or something about people with missing limbs handling food? He said loudly, just enough for the nearby booths to hear. The comment hung in the air like smoke. At the counter, 18-year-old waitress Kaylee froze, eyes flicking to Clara. She looked scared, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Clara didn't blink. She'd been insulted by worse men in far worse places. "I'll be with you in a moment," she said, tone as calm as if nothing had happened. Rick raised his eyebrows. "She speaks. Didn't think you could still take orders, Sergeant." His friends laughed. She brought over menus without a word, laid them down, stepped back. Rick leaned in, fingers tapping the table. "So, tell me, did you get blown up filing paperwork or just trip over your sensitivity?" Again, the laughter. Again, Clara didn't engage. She'd seen grown men cry in war zones and hold the line anyway. She wasn't about to give Rick Madsen the satisfaction of a flinch. But as she wheeled away, dignity intact, Rick extended his foot suddenly, blocking the path. Her wheel jolted, nearly toppling the chair. "Did I say you could go?" he barked. Clara maneuvered around him smoothly. "Your server will be with you shortly." Rick's voice followed her. "Wheelchair warriors should stay home, lady. If you can't stand on your own 2 feet, don't make it our problem." That's when one of his friends stood up. A large man with a patchy beard and beer breath. He reached behind Clara and, without warning, shoved the wheelchair forward. It struck a table. Flipped. Clara hit the floor hard. Her coffee spilled. A tray shattered. Her prosthetic twisted awkwardly beneath her, and her breath caught in her throat as her head met tile. The room went dead silent. No one helped. No one moved. Only the sound of Rick's cruel laughter, bouncing off the booths and napkin dispensers. Kaylee looked horrified, but the manager, Tom, grabbed her arm before she could move. "Don't," he hissed. "They're regulars. Big tippers. Not worth it. But Clara, she's part-time." Tom cut her off. "Let it go." Clara lay there a moment longer, on the ground, in a puddle of coffee, burned, bruised, but not broken. Not yet. She pulled herself upright slowly, arms stronger than most men's from years of compensating for a missing limb. She righted the wheelchair, picked up her things one by one. A wallet, a napkin, a faded photo of her and her squad. Her jacket, soaked in stains, still bore the nearly worn-away eagle, globe, and anchor emblem, barely visible, but unmistakable to those who knew what it meant. Still, no one helped. Not even the veterans that had once nodded her way. Not yet, but one boy saw everything. He was maybe 8, sitting with his dad, a quiet man in a worn jacket that said Desert Storm Veteran on the back. "Dad," the boy whispered, tugging his sleeve. "Was she a soldier too, like you?" The man looked up. His eyes scanned the room, then landed on Clara, her Marine tattoo, the squared shoulders, the unwavering stare. He stood, pulled out his phone, walked outside without a word. "This is Lieutenant Burke," he said into the receiver. "I need to report something. You're not going to believe what I just saw." 30 minutes. That's how long it took. Exactly 30 minutes after Clara Dane hit the floor, the silence of Lena's place was broken, not by laughter, not by words, but by the unmistakable growl of a diesel engine. Low, heavy, purposeful. Gravel outside crunched beneath the weight of a desert, tan Marine Corps Humvee pulling into the lot like a beast out of memory. It didn't park. It occupied space, claimed it. Inside the diner, patrons turned their heads, curious at first, then silent. The door opened, and in stepped 3 United States Marines. Not boys playing dress-up. Not loudmouths in surplus fatigues. These were the real thing. First came a barrel-chested Master Sergeant, his uniform sharp as a knife's edge, silver hair trimmed to the millimeter. He walked with a limp and carried a polished oak cane, not as a crutch, but as a symbol. Behind him, a young corporal, straight-backed, broad-shouldered, wheeled in an empty military-grade wheelchair, and closing the formation was a woman, a captain. Ribbons and medals aligned perfectly across her chest, hair pinned tight under her service cap. Her expression unreadable, except for the steel in her eyes. They didn't say a word. They didn't need to. From the moment they entered, the diner seemed to lose its color. The laughter from Rick's table died mid-breath. Conversation ceased. Silverware froze above plates. Even the ceiling fans seemed to hesitate. The Marines moved in perfect sync toward Table 7, where Clara sat rigid in her soaked uniform, hands folded, eyes forward, her body still trembling from what had happened and from what didn't. The Master Sergeant came to a halt in front of her. He drew himself up. Saluted. Textbook perfect. "Staff Sergeant Dane," he said, voice loud enough for every ear in the room. "Forgive our delayed response, ma'am." Clara blinked. She hadn't been called by rank in years. The reflex came unbidden. Her back straightened, shoulders squared, and with calm precision, she returned the salute. "At ease." "Master Sergeant Wilson," she replied. It was the strongest her voice had sounded in a long time. Kaylee dropped a dish behind the counter. Rick's friends looked everywhere but at Clara, suddenly fascinated by their napkins, their drinks, the cracks in the wall. The captain stepped forward and nodded. "4 coffees," she told Kaylee. "Black. Please." There was no rush in her tone, no anger, just authority. The young corporal remained silent, standing tall behind the wheelchair he had wheeled in. His eyes flicked from Clara to the puddle of coffee on the floor, then to Rick, then back to Clara. And then he smiled, just barely. "I remember you," he said. "Kandahar, 2nd Platoon. You pulled me out after the second blast." Clara studied his face. Her eyes widened. "Corporal Jenkins. You taught us," he said softly, "Marines move as one. Or not at all." Across the diner, someone stood. An elderly man wearing a Korean War cap. He placed both hands on the back of his chair for balance and slowly straightened. At the far booth, a middle-aged woman with an Air Force pin on her jacket stood too. 3 men in civilian National Guard hoodies followed. Without saying a word, they rose to their feet in silent unity. The air shifted again. Clara turned her head slowly. She wasn't alone. Lieutenant Burke re-entered, his young son Tommy in tow. He crossed the threshold with quiet purpose and spoke just one word: "Attention." And half the room stood. Old and young, men and women, veterans who had served decades ago and those who still bore fresh scars beneath their sleeves. All standing, all for her. Rick Madsen sank low in his booth. The man who'd pushed Clara's wheelchair. He couldn't look up. His fingers gripped his glass too tightly, his knuckles white. Master Sergeant Wilson faced them without raising his voice. "In the Corps, we don't raise our voices when the truth is enough," he said. "We fight with honor. We protect those who can't. And we never leave a Marine behind." His gaze bore down on Rick like a judge's gavel. The captain stepped beside him. "This woman," she said, gesturing to Clara, pulled 3 Afghan children out of a burning vehicle after an IED hit her convoy. She earned the Bronze Star with Valor. She gave 23 years to this country, and today she was assaulted on American soil, in front of witnesses, because some people forgot what respect looks like. The room was still. Clara's eyes welled. But she didn't cry. She couldn't. She was still holding the line. "Enough," she whispered. The captain turned to her. "With respect, Staff Sergeant," she replied, "it is not enough." Tom, the manager, finally approached, his apron wrinkled, his confidence gone. "Meals are on the house today, for all of you," he said, voice small. Wilson looked him dead in the eye. "Marines pay our debts, sir. Always have, always will." Clara's voice returned, quiet but clear. "We don't want free meals." Tom nodded and backed away. The silence returned, but it was no longer heavy. It was sacred. A few minutes later, coffee was served. No one at Rick's table touched their food. Rick tried to mumble something. An apology. A defense. But the corporal didn't let him finish. "Semper Fi," Jenkins said coldly, as he stared him down. His tone made it clear the phrase was both a farewell and a warning. As the Marines sat with Clara, something beautiful happened. Patrons began to approach the table, one by one, offering thanks. A quiet, "Ma'am," a respectful nod, a hand placed gently on her shoulder. No grand speeches, no long-winded praise, just silent acknowledgement, recognition, from people who, until that moment, had only seen the woman in the wheelchair, not the warrior who had once dragged the wounded across burning sand. As the evening settled in, a warmth returned to Lena's place. The laughter resumed, but softer, more genuine. People lingered a little longer over their meals, and Rick Madsen, he paid his bill, in silence, then walked out the door, He never returned. The booth where Rick Madsen had once lounged like he owned the place. It sat empty now. Day after day, even when the diner was packed, even when families had to squeeze into window seats or wait outside in the snow, that booth remained untouched, as though the air around it carried the echo of shame too thick to clear. No one needed to be told. Everyone just knew. Clara never asked about Rick, never brought up what happened, and yet everything changed. 1 week later, the old sign above the entrance of Lena's place came down. Mike Lennox climbed the ladder himself, unbolted each rusted screw. In its place, a freshly painted sign, bold and clean. Diner of the Brave. Every soldier has a place here. The name had changed, but the heart had always been there. Now it was just visible for the world to see. Inside, the changes weren't flashy, no grand redecoration, no red, white, and blue fanfare, but the walls spoke louder now. Along the far side of the diner, a new display stretched across the wood paneling, black and white photographs of local veterans, each one labeled by name, service branch, and years of duty. The photos came from drawers and attic boxes. Widows brought in faded images of husbands lost in Korea. Grandfathers mailed in photos from Iraq, and tucked quietly among them was one of Staff Sergeant Clara Dane, taken the year before the blast. Smiling slightly, arms crossed, unit behind her. Her place in that line mattered now. It had always mattered. And now the town finally saw it. Clara didn't change her routine. She still rolled in 5 minutes before her shift. Still folded napkins with the same methodical rhythm. Still brewed coffee like it was sacred. But there was something different in the way people approached her. No more pity in their eyes. No more stares that stopped at the wheelchair. Now they saw the person, the Marine, the woman who never raised her voice, never demanded respect, yet carried more of it than most. And at table 7, where she had once been humiliated, a small brass plaque had been affixed to the edgy, reserved for veterans. You are never alone. Clara didn't ask for it. But she never sat anywhere else again. Every Thursday at exactly 1800 hours, the sound of tires crunching outside became familiar. The desert tan Humvee returned. Master Sergeant Wilson, Captain Elena Rodriguez, Corporal Jenkins, they never discussed that day. Never needed to. Marines didn't waste words on battles already won. They just showed up, ordered coffee, shared quiet meals, told war stories only other veterans could understand. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they sat in silence, staring at nothing, remembering everything. One night, Clara finally spoke more than just coffee orders. She leaned back, coffee in hand, her prosthetic legs stretched comfortably. Remember Sangin? She asked, almost wistfully. Wilson chuckled. You mean when you rigged a radio out of 2 AA batteries and a spoon to call for evac? Improvised field tactics. She smiled. You had no backup for 14 hours. Rodriguez added. And still managed to hold the line. Pure Marine stubbornness. Jenkins grinned. Clara shook her head. Anyone would have done the same. No, Rodriguez said firmly. They wouldn't. That's why you earned those stripes. The ripple didn't stop at the diner. Word got out. Stories traveled. Veterans who hadn't been in Lena's place for years started showing up again. Some came alone, quietly taking a booth in the back. Others came in pairs, introducing themselves to Clara with small nods and the careful courtesy only soldiers carry. A few even brought photos to add to the wall. And more than once, someone left flowers at her table. No note, no explanation, just respect. Lieutenant Burke and his family became Saturday regulars. His son, Tommy, often brought hand-drawn pictures. Crayon stick figures with smiling faces all in uniform, one always in a wheelchair. One morning, Tommy handed Clara his latest. It showed her beside a tank, smiling under a giant yellow sun. Is that supposed to be me? She asked, bemused. Tommy nodded solemnly. Dad says you're a hero. Heroes should smile more. Clara looked at the picture for a long time. Your dad's a wise man, she said. He says. Tommy replied, mimicking his father's voice. What you do matters more than what you say. Then he added quietly, and that real strength isn't about having 2 legs. Clara smiled. Not the polite kind. The real kind. The one that hadn't shown up in years. The town took notice. The mayor issued a proclamation declaring the last Thursday of every month Veterans Day at Diner of the Brave, offering free meals to all who served. The local high school invited Clara to speak to seniors about what service means. She didn't tell stories of combat. She talked about discipline, about purpose, about what it means to stand firm even when you're knocked down. "It's not the uniform that makes you a Marine," she told them. "It's what you do when the world forgets what you sacrificed." Tom, the manager, changed too. He started wearing a tie, pressed shirts, a small American flag pin on his collar, and when a Vietnam vet named Roy came in with trembling hands and a duffel bag, Tom greeted him at the door with a handshake and a booth already prepared. The diner became something more than a place for coffee. It became neutral ground, a place where young recruits, old soldiers, and civilians could sit shoulder to shoulder, sharing stories or simply sharing space. Where no one asked what happened, but no one ignored it either. One night just before closing, a young man in a crisp new Army uniform entered. He looked lost, eyes darting, cap in hand. Clara wheeled over to him. "First deployment?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Ship out tomorrow, ma'am." Clara gestured to the open seat at her booth. "Join us. Coffee's decent. Company's better. I wouldn't want to intrude." "You're not intruding," she said gently. "You're continuing a tradition." The soldier sat. Master Sergeant Wilson raised his mug. All around the room, other veterans raised theirs in quiet solidarity. No words. None were needed. The gesture said everything. "You are seen. You are one of us. You will never stand alone." The sun was just starting to fall behind the Montana hills, casting long shadows across the gravel lot of Diner of the Brave. Inside, the warmth from within spilled through the glass. Golden light, moving bodies, coffee steam curling upward like incense in a quiet church. Clara Dane sat at table 7, alone for now, folding napkins the way she always did. 3 precise creases, aligned edges, tucked into silverware sleeves. It was muscle memory habit. Order in a world that had once gone to hell. Her jacket was clean today, pressed tight against her back. The Marine Corps pin shimmered openly on her collar, and on the back of her wheelchair, a small scarlet and gold flag fluttered gently. Semper Fi. The same chair. The same woman. But everything had changed. Across the room, Melissa, one of the newer servers, paused mid-order and glanced toward Clara, then walked over. She carried a notepad, but not for taking orders. "Miss Dane," she said, voice nervous, "would you mind teaching me?" Clara looked up. "Teaching you what?" "Rank structure, the ribbons, what they mean, how to ask questions without sounding clueless." Clara set the napkin down. She gestured to the booth across from her. "Sit. First thing you need to know, never call a Marine miss." Melissa smiled and sat. Outside the window, 2 more veterans were crossing the lot. One in a faded Operation Iraqi Freedom jacket, the other in pressed jeans and a Purple Heart ball cap. They'd become Thursday regulars too. The booth once filled with cruelty and mockery. Still empty. Some seats just can't be refilled. Clara didn't ask what happened to Rick Madsen. She didn't need to. Rumors came through quietly. His employer let him go. Something about conduct unbecoming. Word was, someone had shown them a recording from that afternoon. His buddies scattered soon after. Rick moved 2 towns over. Disappeared. Justice hadn't roared, it whispered. And Clara never celebrated. Some battles weren't worth revisiting. She had other things to focus on, like the young woman who came in one rainy Friday afternoon, Army fatigues, soaked boots, hair tied tight, eyes heavy. She didn't speak at first. Just sat at the counter, staring into black coffee. Eventually Clara wheeled over. "Which base are you shipping from?" "Fort Drum." The girl answered, surprised. Clara nodded. "You're first." She nodded back. "You scared?" "A beat." "Yeah." Clara placed a hand gently on the counter. "Good. That means you understand the weight. Want a seat at our table?" The girl hesitated, then followed her over. By the end of the meal, she had 3 phone numbers, 2 care package contacts, and a standing invitation to Thursday dinners. The town itself changed too. The gas station across the street added a sign, "Veteran, owned. Ask about the discount." The mayor pushed through a small memorial in the park. Nothing grand. Just a stone bench, 3 flagpoles, and a plaque that read in honor of those who served and those who still stand tall. And once a month, the high school students volunteered to bus tables and clean up after Veterans Night at the diner. Most of them leaving quiet, humbled, a little changed. Clara didn't become famous. She didn't give interviews. Didn't post online. But one reporter from a regional paper begged her for a quote during a veterans event held at the diner 6 months later. "What made all this happen?" he asked. She looked around. At the photos on the wall, at the waitress learning insignias, at the new recruit laughing with Master Sergeant Wilson, at Tommy drawing another crayon soldier with one leg and a big smile. Then she said softly, "Someone pushed me out of my chair. But I stood up anyway. That's all." The reporter wrote that down. It never made the headline, but it's what people remembered. One night, as they were closing up, Wilson leaned back in his chair and sighed. "You know, Clara," he said, "this whole place, it's become more than a diner." Clara nodded. "It's a barracks in disguise." He smiled. "More like a sanctuary." She looked out the window, where the Humvee waited under a violet sky. "I used to think I'd lost everything that made me a Marine," she said quietly. "The leg, the mission, the identity. But then you all showed up, reminded me it's not the battlefield that makes us who we are." Wilson raised his coffee. "Semper Fi." She clinked her mug to his. "Semper Fi." Outside, the handwritten note was still taped to the Humvee's windshield. The ink had faded slightly, but the words remained. "We always come back for those who never quit." Clara didn't need medals anymore. Didn't need applause. She just needed that. A place where no one stood alone. Some victories aren't earned with medals. They're earned in silence, when no one claps, when no one cheers. Yet you choose to stand anyway. Clara Dane didn't ask for recognition. She didn't demand justice. She simply held the line, even when dignity was stripped away by cruelty and a roomful of silence. But in doing so, she reminded everyone watching, both inside the diner and beyond, that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it rolls in quietly, on wheels, wearing scars that don't need to be explained. The greatest kind of courage is not in fighting wars, but in standing tall when the world tries to knock you down. But true community is not built through slogans, but through showing up for those who can't always stand alone. And the real mark of honor is what you do when no one is watching and no one is clapping. If this story touched your heart, if you believe no veteran should ever be left behind, if you believe dignity, kindness, and solidarity matter in a world that sometimes forgets them, please comment, respect, below. It helps more people see the stories that deserve to be told. And if you'd like more stories like this, real, human, powerful, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you'll never miss the next one. Thank you for listening. And wherever you are, may you always find a place where you are seen, where you are heard, and where you are never left behind.